سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين. I ask Allah to grant us sincere intentions. Ameen. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad he destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, the Hadrami Introduction, Al-Muqaddimah Al-Hadramiyah, which is an introductory text in the fiqh of the Shafi'i school, written by the Allama Ba'fadl Rahimahullah. We've made it now to page 10. We've made it to page what? 10. At the top of the page, it says the nullifiers of wudu. I remind you that these chapter titles are not part of the actual book. That's something the translator put there. But it's true that this next section deals with the things that break wudu. 1 second, please. Assalamu alaikum. It says, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, the acts that nullify wudu are 4. What the author means here is that according to the Shafi'i madhab, there are 4 things that break wudu. Or to put it another way, there are 4 things that cause minor hadath to come onto your body. Okay, and I remind you that if you have minor hadath on your body, then you cannot perform a valid salat in that situation. Okay, and the way you get minor hadath off of your body is by performing a valid wudu. And we've been speaking the last few classes about wudu. What are the conditions of it? What are the integrals of it? What are the recommended actions of it? We talked about the rules for wiping on foot gear, which can be done as a substitute for one part of the wudu. So we've been talking about wudu a lot, mashallah. Now we're coming to the things that invalidate the wudu, the things that break the wudu. Or again, to use another expression that's perhaps a bit more precise, what are the things that cause minor hadath to come onto your body? And I want to make very clear here that according to the Shafi'i school, these 4 things are the only 4 things that cause minor hadath. So nothing will break your wudu except these 4 things. Excuse me again, I apologize. Assalamu alaikum. So these 4 things are the only 4 things that break wudu. So if something happens to you and it's not in this list of 4 things, then that means you did not break your wudu. Okay? Let's go through the list of the things that nullify wudu. Number 1, It says that which comes out of the two exits. Okay, so the first thing that breaks wudu would be anything that comes out of the two exits. What do we mean by two exits? We mean the front exit where the urine comes out and the back exit where the feces comes out. These two exits, if anything comes out of these exits, it breaks your wudu. It doesn't matter if the thing that comes out was moist or dry. Okay? It doesn't matter if the thing that comes out was a solid, a liquid, or a gas. It doesn't matter if the thing that comes out is something normal, like urine or pre-seminal fluid or feces, or one breaks wind. These things are normal. It doesn't matter if the thing that comes out is something normal or if the thing that comes out is something unusual, like blood or stones or a worm. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. Anything that comes out of one of these exits, it breaks the wudu simply by coming out. Even if it goes out and then comes back in. Like imagine you ate some bad food and ended up with worms in your gut. And say you felt a worm stick his head out of your behind and then pull his head back in. Your wudu was broken because the head came out. Anything that comes out of one of these two exits breaks your wudu, even if it goes back in. Okay? That would include like feces. You know, if the first little tip of the feces came out and then it went back in, your wudu would be broken. Inshallah, that's clear. But then it says, still on number one, then it says, excluding semen. So there is one exception to this rule. There's one exception to this rule, meaning there is one thing that if it comes out of one of these two exits, then it will not break your wudu. Okay, although in this case, that thing, if it comes out, it will necessitate that you make a ghusl. All the other things that come out of these exits necessitate what? A wudu. But if this thing comes out, it will necessitate a ghusl. What is the thing that we're talking about? It says excluding semen. Okay, and by semen, it means your own semen. It means your own semen. Okay, we're not talking right now about, you know, if someone else's semen falls out. Okay, if someone else's semen falls out, that does break wudu. Okay, that does break wudu. MashaAllah. If you have questions, as always, ask in the chat box, insha'Allah ta'ala. So what are the things that break wudu? Number one is anything that comes out of the front or back exit, except semen. So that means urine breaks wudu. It means pre-seminal fluid, you know, the wetness that sometimes happens to the man or the woman if they get sexually excited. That, if it comes out, it breaks wudu. Wedi is an Arabic word. I don't know what the equivalent is in English, but it's like a clear or sometimes whitish fluid that might come out of the body if you lift something that's very heavy. It might come out. If that comes out, it breaks your wudu. Blood, if it comes out, breaks your wudu, whether it comes out of the front or back. And when I say the front exit, I'm talking about not only the place where the urine comes out, but in the case of the woman, we're talking also about the vagina. Okay, because the front exit for the woman is like basically what's between, as they say, the lips. So there's a hole where the urine comes out, and then there's, of course, the bigger hole where the baby comes out. If anything were to come out of either of those holes, that's considered to be exiting from the front exit, and it breaks the wudu. If a person has kidney stones and a stone comes out, it breaks your wudu. If a person ate bad food and a worm came out, say from the back exit, that breaks the wudu. If a person breaks wind, say from the back exit, that breaks your wudu. If a person breaks wind from the front exit, which can happen, that also breaks wudu. Even if something comes out that's completely dry, which is hard to imagine, but if something came out completely dry, it would also break wudu. The only exception to this is, again, your own semen. And when I say semen, just to be very clear here, I'm using semen as a translation of the Arabic word mani. The Arabic word mani, it applies to the thing that the men release when they reach their sexual pleasure, but mani also applies to what the women release when they have their sexual pleasure. Okay, so when I say semen here, and when the translator says semen here, he's not only talking about the stuff that men release, he's talking about the thing that men release as well as the thing that women release. And it has certain signs, it has certain indications. Okay, so if you wake up, for example, in the morning and you see a stain in your underwear and you don't know, what is this thing that's in my underwear? Is that semen? Do I need to make a ghusl? Or is that maybe like urine? Or is it maybe some pre-seminal fluid? Is it, something that would require only a wudu, not a ghusl? If you're not sure what this stuff is that came out, you should know that semen has signs. There are signs that the thing that came out is semen. There are 3 signs. And if any one of these signs is true, then you should conclude that the substance is, in fact, semen. Okay, it is not the case that all 3 signs have to be true. If even one of the 3 signs is true, then you should conclude that this substance is semen. The first sign that something is semen is what? That it comes out in spurts. It comes out in spurts. Okay? Most of the other things that come out of the exits come out kind of continually in like a flowy kind of way, whereas semen comes out in bursts. There's like a burst and then a pause, then a burst. This is one of the signs that something is semen. So if the thing that came out in spurts, then you would conclude that the thing that came out is semen. The second sign is that semen has pleasure associated with its release. So if the substance came out of the body and you felt pleasure with the release of that substance, then you should conclude that this substance is semen. It's mani, which means it doesn't break your wudu, but it does require a ghusl. And the third sign that will let you know that something is semen is the smell. The smell. Semen has a particular smell. Okay, when the semen is wet, it smells like dough. It smells like dough, like the stuff that you bake into bread. When the semen is wet, it smells like dough. And when the semen is dry, it smells like egg whites. It smells like egg whites. So if you wake up in the morning and you find this stain in the underwear and you can't remember if it came out in spurts, you don't know because you were asleep if you felt pleasure, you can smell it. If the thing in the underwear is wet, then see if it smells like dough. If the thing in the underwear is dry, see if it smells like egg whites. If it has a smell of semen, then you should conclude that it is semen, and you should then go ahead and make a ghusl. I'm going to say it again. What are the 3 signs that something is semen? Number 1, it comes out in spurts. Number 2, it comes out with pleasure. And number 3, it has a certain smell. When it's wet, it smells like dough. And when it's dry, it smells like egg whites. These 3 signs are the only 3 signs that something is semen. The scholars specifically reject that color is a sign. Okay, you cannot identify that something is semen by the color of it. Okay, semen does not always have the same color. All right, semen can be clear, semen can be white, semen can be yellowish. And then if a person is sick or injured, it can even have colors other than that. It can be red, like a bloody color, for example. Color is not a reliable sign to tell if something is semen. So don't use color to make this determination. All right, use the 3 signs that we mentioned, which are what? Comes out in spurts, comes out with pleasure, and it has a particular smell. Again, if you have questions, put them in the box. Number 2, what's the second thing that breaks wudu? It says loss of mind. What it means when it says loss of mind is it means loss of consciousness. Okay, you enter a state where you're no longer aware of what you're doing or what you're saying. You're no longer aware of what you're doing or what you're saying. That's what's meant. Okay? It says loss of mind through insanity. So one means that you might no longer know what you're doing and saying is if you go insane, like you lose your mind. It says unconsciousness. So another way that you might lose your consciousness is by fainting or entering a coma. Something of that sort also breaks your wudu. It says or sleep. Okay, so another thing that would cause you to lose consciousness is being asleep. Because when one is asleep, he doesn't know what he's saying and doing. Okay, many of us know people who will mumble or talk in their sleep and they don't know that they're talking. You know, in some cases, people might even get up and walk around and do things while they're asleep and they don't know that they're doing those things. Okay, so when a person is asleep, they are unconscious. They've lost their consciousness, and losing consciousness does break wudu, meaning it causes minor hadath to come onto the body. It says excluding sleeping whilst sitting and firmly establishing one's bottom. Okay, my books adds the words on the ground, but you should just put that between brackets because on the ground is not mentioned in the original text, and it's not a condition that it be on the ground. So those words are misleading. Okay, it's saying here that if you lose consciousness by means of insanity, some other type of unconsciousness, or even sleep, then that breaks your wudu. And the exception is if you fall asleep in a particular position. All right, what position is that? If you're sitting down with your butt firmly planted on whatever it is you're sitting on, which might be the ground, but it might be a chair, or it might be the back of an animal. Okay, but if you're sitting on something in such a way that your butt is firmly planted on it, and you would not be able to break wind in that position. Okay, if you're in that position when you fall asleep, and then when you wake up, you're still in that position, then in that case, we say that you did not break your wudu. And if you had wudu when you fell asleep, you still have wudu when you wake up. Okay, so it's possible to sleep without breaking your wudu, but you have to sit with your butt firmly planted. So if you're sitting in a chair, for example, you need to have your back straight. If you're reclining like this, then it's possible for a person to break wind. All right, if you're leaning to the side, sleeping like this, it's possible to break wind. Your butt is only firmly planted when you're sitting up straight. Okay? Although it is possible to lean forward, it's also possible to lean back a small amount and your butt still be firmly planted. The important thing is not to lean forward so much that your butt is no longer firmly planted, or lean back so much that your butt is no longer firmly planted. And the way you can tell if it's firmly planted or not is how? By knowing if it's possible for you to break wind in that position. Any questions about number 2? Okay. Well, then let's go to number 3. It says the touching of the skins of a man with a woman. So the third thing that breaks wudu is if a man and a woman, if their skins touch one another. The man's skin touched the woman's skin. A skin-to-skin touch breaks the wudu for both of them. For the one who did the touching, as well as the one who got touched. It breaks the wudu for both of them. But note that this only takes place if one of these people is a male and the other person is a female. All right, we're not talking right now about two men touching, like if they shake hands. A skin-to-skin touch for a man does not break the wudu. Okay, generally speaking. A skin-to-skin touch between women does not break the wudu, generally speaking. Yes, if this touch was done with desire, then that's a separate story. But ordinarily, if the men are straight, then a skin-to-skin touch is not going to have any desire associated with it. And if the women are straight, a skin-to-skin touch will not have any desire associated with it. So the general rule is that it's the touch between a man and a woman, skin-to-skin. That's the case where there's a supposition that desire or pleasure of some kind would take place. This is why it does not break your wudu if the man and woman touching one another are very close relatives. Like if a man hugs his own mother and their cheeks touch as part of the hug, this would not break their wudus because there's no presumption of desire or pleasure between a person and their own mother. Just like between, a brother and a sister, or like if you're very closely related, so close that it's haram for you to get married in all circumstances. It's haram for you to get married. If you're very closely related to that extent, then in that case, touching skin to skin does not break wudu. Insha'Allah, that is clear. Now, when we say that the touch is between a male and a female, or as it says in the book, a man and a woman, we're not talking about very young people. We're not talking about 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Okay? We're talking about a case where both of the people, the man and the woman whose skins touched, both of these people have reached a stage in their physical development that normal people find people at that stage in development attractive. Okay, one thing I want to really drive home here, we're not talking about a specific age. We're not saying once you're 14 years old, then touching skins breaks your wudu. It's not about a certain age. It's about the development, the physical maturity of the person. And humans mature at different rates. We've all seen girls or even boys who are quite young, but they have the body of someone who's very old. Like they've matured. And then someone else will be the same age as them, and physically they have not matured. Okay, so it's not the age that matters. It's the stage of physical development that matters. So if a person reaches a certain stage of physical development at which normal people find people of that stage attractive, then in that case, if the man is at such a stage and the woman is at such a stage, then touching skin to skin will break the wudu. Why did I say a normal person finds people of that stage attractive? Because we're not talking about abnormal people. All right, there are people out there in the world who, when they see like a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, little kid, they find that attractive. Okay, these people are abnormal. We're not talking about abnormal people. We're talking about normal people. All right, there's a stage in the physical development of the human being where normal people begin to be attracted to people at that stage. Okay, even if they're not attracted to that individual person. All right, we're not saying that the people who touch find each other attractive. No. We're saying that their bodies have already passed the point where normal people begin to find people attractive. So, for example, both the people are age 14 or older. For example, okay, even though in reality, there might be someone who, for whatever reason, is older than 14 and still looks like an 8-year-old. Okay, it might happen. And even though in reality, you might have someone who at 9 or 10 already looks like an 18-year-old. Okay, it doesn't go by the actual age, it goes by the development of the person. But as long as both people involved have reached that stage of development, even if they reached it years ago, like even if someone's 90 years old now, they reached that stage of development 80 years earlier. Okay, so once you've reached that stage of development, you are now one of the people who, if you touch skin to skin with someone of the opposite sex who has also reached that stage of development at some point in their life, then it will break the wudu for both of you. Just want to make sure this is understood. I know I'm talking a lot about it, but I want to make sure we understand the details here. Also, while we're on the topic, I'm going to say that if a man touches his own wife, skin to skin, they both lose their wudu. Okay? Don't think just because you're married that you can touch your wife skin to skin without breaking your wudu. Okay? It doesn't matter that she's your wife. Okay? The fact that she's your wife means that you're permitted to touch her skin to skin. It's permissible for you. It's not haram for you to touch her skin to skin. In fact, with the right intention, it might even be rewardable for you to touch her skin to skin, but it still breaks your wudu. All right? Your wudu gets broken. So once you touch your wife's skin to skin, you will need to make wudu before you can make salat. Doesn't mean it's haram to touch your wife, but it means you need to make wudu before you make salat. Okay, this is because a wife is not the same as a close family member. Okay? It's not normal for the human being to be sexually attracted to his own mother or his own sister or his own daughter, for example. Okay, but it actually is quite normal for a man to be sexually attracted to his wife. Okay, there's a difference. Okay, just because the wife has become part of your family doesn't mean the wife is like a close blood relative. Okay, it's not the same situation. Okay, when the husband touches the wife skin to skin, they both lose their wudu according to the Shafi'i madhab. And while I'm at it, I'll clarify that when we say skin to skin, we mean skin touching skin. Okay? Your hair is not skin. So if the man touches a woman's hair, this will not break their wudus. Although, unless that woman is a close family member or your wife, then it's going to be haram for you to touch her hair, but it won't break the wudu. Similarly, fingernails, toenails, teeth, these things are not skin. So if your skin touches the teeth or fingernails or toenails or hair of somebody of the opposite sex, it does not break your wudu. But again, this does not mean that it's permissible for you to do it. The question of whether you're allowed to do it is a completely different question from the question of whether your wudu is broken. Okay, there are people for whom you're allowed to touch them skin to skin, and if you touch them skin to skin, you do not lose your wudu. That would be your close blood relatives, like a mother or a daughter. There are people who, if you touch them skin to skin, it's permissible for you to do that, but you do break your wudu. That would be like your wife. There are people who it's haram for you to touch them skin to skin, but how do I put it? There are cases where it's haram to touch the person, but if you touch them, you do not lose your wudu. That would be like if you touched a woman who's not your close blood kin, nor your wife, but the place that you touched her was on like the hair or the teeth, the tooth or the nails. And it's possible that there's a touching that's haram for you to do, and if you do it, you lose your wudu. That would be like to touch a woman who's not blood kin nor your wife, skin to skin. That would be haram, and it breaks your wudu. Okay, I find that, when I talk to people about these things, the number one source of misunderstanding, the number one source of confusion is that people conflate things. They take two issues that are separate issues and they link them together and they lose the fact that they're separate. You don't want to be like that. Okay, it's possible for a touch to be haram and you don't lose wudu. It's possible for a touch to be haram and you do lose your wudu. It's possible for a touch to be permissible and you don't lose your wudu. It's possible for a touch to be permissible and you do lose your wudu. That's because the question of wudu is independent of the question of being haram. You got to break in your mind the link between those things. I can't tell you how many times I've mentioned to somebody that if a man touches his wife skin to skin, they lose their wudu, and then the person immediately jumps to some crazy conclusion that says, "You're not allowed to touch your wife." I said, "No, you are allowed to touch your wife. It's permissible." And like I said, with the right intention, it might even be rewardable. Okay? Just because it breaks your wudu doesn't mean you're not allowed to do it. Okay? Don't jump to wild conclusions. All right? These are separate things. I mean, very, very separate things. Okay? It'd be like if somebody told you, I don't know, that, fried chicken is bad for your health, and then you draw a conclusion that therefore boiled eggs are bad. I'm like, well, it's true, an egg was laid by a chicken, but you're talking different things. Okay, try not to conflate things that need to be kept separate. MashaAllah. So let's repeat. If a man and woman touch skin to skin, they both lose their wudu, both the one who did the touching and the one who got touched. But the condition for that is what? That both of them have reached or surpassed a stage in their physical development where normal people find them attractive. And it's also a condition for them to lose their wudu that the two people who touched are not close blood relatives. They're not mahrams. Okay? And a mahram can be blood relatives, but it's also possible for someone to be a mahram by milk or by marriage. Regardless of what caused the person to become a mahram, if you touch a mahram skin to skin, it does not break your wudu. I remind you, your wife is not a mahram. Okay, if she had been a mahram, you wouldn't have been allowed to marry her. Mahram, by definition, is someone you will never, ever, under any circumstances, be allowed to marry. Let's continue. When we say that the man and the woman break their wudu by touching their skins in the way that we described, you should know that it does not matter if the touch was intentional or unintentional. So, for example, if you are at work and a woman extends her hand for you to shake hands with her, Well, if you shake hands with her, number one, that's haram. But number two, if you do it, then you intentionally touch her skin to skin and you both lose your wudu. Okay? That's an example of an intentional touch. But even if the touch were not intentional, like say you're just walking down the hall and she's walking down the hall and your hands just grazed one another by mistake, you both lose your wudu. Or if you're at the store, you're at the supermarket or the drugstore or whatever, and the cashier hands you your change or hands you your receipt, and your skin touches the cashier's skin in the process, you both lose your wudu. Okay, it doesn't matter if the touch was intentional or unintentional. It also doesn't matter if the two people who touched are alive or dead. Okay, so men, if a woman died and you touched her body, you touched her dead body, you would lose your wudu. Of course, a dead person doesn't lose her wudu because the dead person doesn't even have wudu anymore. But it doesn't matter if the person you touched was alive or dead. Doesn't matter if it was intentional or unintentional. Let's keep reading. It says, both the one touching and the one being touched will be nullified. Okay, meaning the wudu of the one touching and the wudu of the one being touched will be nullified. The young child, it says, who isn't in a position of desire, which is not really a great translation. They should have said something more like, who isn't at an age where normally desired, or at a stage in their physical development where normally desired. It says this doesn't apply. So if you're a grown man and some 8-year-old girl shakes your hand, this doesn't break the wudu because the girl is too young. Okay? Or if you're a grown woman and some 8-year-old boy shakes your hand, this is not going to break the wudu because the boy is too young. It says, nor does the touching of hair, tooth, or nail. This is because hair and teeth and nails are not skin. And the condition here is that if you touch skin to skin, that's what breaks the wudu. Okay, but beware, there are some parts of the body which technically are not skin, but in the Sharia, they're treated as if they're skin. That would be the tongue and the gums inside your mouth. The tongue and the gums are not skin, and for that matter, the walls of the cheeks on the inside. These things are not skin, but they're treated as if they're skin. So if your skin touched that person's gums or that person's tongue or the inside of that person's cheek, this would break the wudu of both of you because it's as if that's skin. It says the exception to this includes someone who is unmarriageable by blood relation, breastfeeding, or through marital bond. Who are the people who are unmarriageable? They're mahrams. Who are the people who are unmarriageable by blood relation? There's 7 of them. Your mother. Okay, and when we say mother, that includes like your grandmother and great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother. Okay, your mother, even if it's back a few generations, those people are mahrams. Okay, you're not allowed to marry them. Your daughter, and that includes granddaughter, great-granddaughter, great-great-granddaughter. These people are mahrams for you. Your sister, that includes your full sister or your half sister. Number 4 is your aunt. Whether that aunt is the sister of some man in your ancestry, or whether that aunt, number 5, whether that aunt is the sister of a woman in your ancestry. Both of these types of aunt are mahrams for you. Number 6 would be the daughter of one of your brothers, okay, your niece, this would be a mahram for you. And again, it doesn't matter if it's your brother's daughter or brother's granddaughter or brother's great granddaughter. This is still your niece. This woman is haram for you. And the last one, number 7, would be the daughter of one of your sisters, whether full sister or half sister. That sister's daughter is a mahram to you, just like that sister's granddaughter and great granddaughter would be a mahram to you. Okay, these are the 7 people who are unmarriageable. It's forbidden for you to marry these people in all circumstances. It's forbidden. Okay, those 7 are by blood relation. You should understand from this that a cousin, even if it's a first cousin, is someone Islamically you're allowed to marry. Even if culturally people find that, may find that unacceptable. Islamically, a first cousin is distant enough that you can marry that person. Next, it says breastfeeding. The same 7 people who are forbidden by blood are also forbidden by milk. So if you as a baby were breastfed by a woman, that woman is now your mother by milk. So she's forbidden to you just like your mother by birth is forbidden to you. And if you have a sister by milk, meaning a girl who was breastfed by the same woman, she's your sister by milk, she is now forbidden to you. Or if you had a daughter by milk, okay? So men, if you caused your wife to be pregnant, and because of that pregnancy, she produced milk, and then she breastfed a baby girl that's not your baby, that baby girl is now your daughter by milk. She is forbidden for you to marry. Similarly, your aunts, okay, that woman who breastfed you, her sisters are mahrams to you. Okay, and assuming her husband is the one that caused her to produce milk, then the husband's sisters are also forbidden for you because those are your aunts by milk. Similarly, your nieces by milk. So if you had a brother or a sister who's a milk brother or sister, that person's children are also forbidden to you. Everyone that's forbidden by blood is also forbidden by milk. And the last thing it says is, or through marital bond. So there are 4 women who are forbidden for you to ever marry once a marriage takes place. That would be the mother-in-law as well as the stepmother. Okay, so for example, if you got married and your wife had a mother who is alive, her mother is now a mahram to you. You would never be able to marry her simply because you married her daughter first. So now the mother becomes a mahram immediately. A stepmother is a similar case. If your father got married to someone, then that woman who married your father is now a mahram to you. So the ones who are forbidden by marriage are 4. We said already the mother-in-law and stepmother. There's also the daughter-in-law and stepdaughter. So the daughter-in-law would be like if your son married somebody, then that wife of your son is your daughter-in-law. She is now forbidden for you forever. And the last one is the stepdaughter. The stepdaughter is a little bit different. But if you marry a woman, if you, the man, marry a woman, and that woman already has a daughter from an earlier marriage, okay? Once you consummate this marriage, at that moment, the daughter becomes a mahram to you, and you will now never, ever be able to marry her for the end of time. Okay, but unlike the other 3 I just mentioned, the stepdaughter doesn't become a mahram until the marriage to the mother is consummated. All the others become a mahram at the moment of the marriage. But if you marry a woman who has a daughter, Simply because you married the mother, that doesn't make the daughter a mahram right away. Only when you consummate with the mother. Now that we've reviewed who the mahrams are, know that if you touch a mahram skin to skin, it does not break your wudu. MashaAllah. I expected to see more questions. Good. Let's do number 4, and then we'll stop for the day, insha'Allah. The fourth and final thing that breaks your wudu, according to the Shafi'i school, is touching the front private part of a human or the anal sphincter with the inner part of the palm. Okay. Please understand, number 4 and number 3 are 2 completely different cases. Don't mix them up. Number 4, we're talking now about touching the private part or touching the anus. Like the anus, that little ring where the poop comes out. We're talking about touching the ring or touching the front private part. For men, for this issue, when we say the front private part, we're talking about the penis, including the head and the shaft. We're not talking about the testicles. We're talking about the penis part. That's the front private part for men. For women, we're talking about what's between the lips of the vagina. Okay, if you touch what's between the lips, or if you touch the penis, or if you touch the anus of a human being, then that breaks wudu, as long as the touch happened with the inside part of the hand, which is this part, and without there being some kind of barrier between the hand and the private part or the anus. The inside part of the hand is this part that you see here. If you want to be more specific to know exactly what's the inside part of the hand, what you do is you put your hands together like this, and you leave like a bit of a space between the fingers, and you press very slightly. Okay, if you do that, then anything that you cannot see is the inside part of your hand. Whatever disappeared because it's pressed up against the other hand, that's the inside part of the hand. Anything that you can see is not the inside part of the hand. So what that means is the sides of your fingers are not the inside part. The tip, meaning the very tip, I'm not talking about this part of the fingertip. No, that's the inside of the hand. But the tip that's up here is not part of the inside of the hand. Okay, the inside, the sides of the fingers and the tips of the fingers, all of those things are not the inside part of the hand. Okay, as for the thumb, your thumbs don't quite line up exactly right when you do this. So to understand what's the inside part of the thumbs is you go like this. You put one thumb on the other thumb and press slightly. Whatever you cannot see is the inside part of the thumb. Whatever you can see is not the inside part. So if you touch the private part of a human with the inside part of the hand, without a barrier, this breaks the wudu of the one who did the touching. It does not break the wudu of the one who got touched. It breaks the wudu of the one who did the touching. Okay? And it does not matter the sex of the person you touched. So touching the private part or the anus of a human will break your wudu, whether the person was a male or a female, whether the person was old or young, whether the person was alive or dead, whether the touch was intentional or unintentional. All right. What matters for number 4 is whether the other person was a human being and whether the touch was with the inside part of the hand without a barrier. In fact, if you touch your own private part with the inside part of the hand, it breaks your wudu. Because touching the private part of a human with the inside part of the hand always breaks the wudu of the one who did the touching. So if you have a baby and you're changing the baby's diaper, be careful. Because if the inside part of your hand touches that baby's anus or touches that baby's private part, you just broke your wudu. Now, don't go overboard about it. I've heard of people doing all kind of crazy things, changing the baby's diaper, trying not to break wudu. Right? There's no need to jump through that many hoops. Like, it's not hard to make wudu. Okay? Clean the baby properly and make another wudu if you have to. Some people will bend over backwards to avoid breaking wudu, as if making wudu is some kind of difficult thing. It's not hard to make wudu. You don't need to make your life difficult just to avoid doing something easy. Okay, obviously there are certain circumstances where you can't easily make wudu, but most of the time making wudu is pretty easy. Let's keep reading. It says the one being touched isn't nullified. The dead person's private areas will result in being nullified, as does the child. Also, the area where the male organ would be, if severed or absent, and the severed male organ. What that means is, imagine that someone a male had their private part cut off. What it's saying here is if that private part fell on the ground and you touched it with the inside part of your hand, it would still break your wudu, even though that private part is now detached from the person's body. It's still a human private part. Touching it with the inside part of the hand will still break your wudu. Similarly, that man who had his part cut off, what's left of it, the little stump, or maybe there isn't even a stump. Maybe it's just like, a flat patch of skin where it used to be. The spot where the penis used to be, touching that spot with the inside part of the hand will break the wudu. This is probably more detail than any of you counted on getting, mashallah. It says the private part of the animal doesn't nullify, nor does touching with the fingertips or between the fingers. So if you touch the private part of an animal, okay, say you had a cat or something like that, and when you were petting it or something by mistake, the inside part of your finger touched the cat's butt. It does not break your wudu to touch the anus of an animal. It breaks your wudu to touch the private part or the anus of a human being. And it says touching with the fingertips or between the fingers does not break wudu. Again, by fingertips, he's not talking about these things, the fingertip here. He's talking about the fingertip here at the very tip of the finger, the part that's not considered the inside of the hand. This part is considered the inside of the hand, but this part, as well as the sides, are not considered the inside of the hand. So, for example, if a man wanted to urinate and he held his fingers like this, such that his penis, he only touched the penis with the sides of the finger, not the inside part of the hand, but only the sides of the finger, well, then in that case, he would not break his wudu by means of number 4. Okay, we got 4 causes here that break wudu. He would avoid cause number 4 by doing that. But if urine actually comes out, well, then he would still lose his wudu because of cause number 1, which is something coming out of one of the 2 exits. But if he's holding it like this and he ends up not peeing, like the pee doesn't come out, then because he held it between his fingers, he did not break his wudu. Whereas if he held it with the inside part of his hand, he would break his wudu even if no pee came out. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Let's take some questions, insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala to those who salammed me. Doesn't look like a lot of comments today. Okay, someone asked about a small bubble of gas. Okay, I want to explain this issue to make sure it's clear. If you break wind, if gas comes out from the inside of your body, if it goes through your butthole to the outside of your body, this breaks your wudu. This is true in the Shafi'i school and the Maliki school. And it doesn't matter whether you made a sound or smelled something, it breaks your wudu, according to the Shafi'i as well as the Maliki school. This is because the gas came out from your body. Like you could tell it came from inside of your body to out. This breaks your wudu. Okay, I just want to get that very clear out there. As for the hadith, and what you're referring to, sister, is the hadith. The hadith is talk about a person who doesn't know if the gas came from inside his body or not. You see, the reality is when you're in salat, because you're bending over and straightening up, you're sitting down, you're getting up, you know, the butt cheeks of the human being in some positions will spread out and then they'll come back together again, and they'll spread out and come back together again. Sometimes you get like a little bubble of air that gets trapped in the butt cheeks, and you kind of feel the air that's trapped between the butt cheeks come out. And in this situation, you're not sure. Did that air come from inside of my body? Like, did it actually go through the anus from the inside to the outside? Or is that just air that was caught in my underwear? Is that just air that was caught between the butt cheeks? In this situation, you do not have certainty that you broke wind. You don't know for sure that you broke wind. So this is a situation where unless you smell a smell, or unless you heard a sound of a fart coming out, then you should conclude that you did not break wind. You should conclude that was just air moving in your clothing. Okay, because you don't know that it came from inside your body. So at that point, you don't have any evidence that you broke wind. You didn't feel that it came from inside your body, and you haven't smelled anything, and you haven't heard anything. So you have no evidence that you broke wudu. In this case, what you should do is just continue and finish your salat, and you should conclude that you did not break wudu. In fact, you should conclude that you did not break wind. Okay, that's how it works in both the Shafi'i and the Maliki school. But please understand, you apply this rule in the case where you don't know for sure that you actually broke wind. We're not talking about a case where you can tell that you farted. You can tell it came from inside your body and came out. Okay, but it was just like a little bubble, but you know that it was a real fart. In that case, you have to conclude that your wudu is broken, because anything that comes out from either of the two exits breaks your wudu. And even in the Maliki school, which has more details about what breaks wudu than the Shafi'i school does, even in the Maliki school, if you know that you farted, you have to rule that your wudu is broken. Someone asks, is this because people are considered some type of family? Okay, not some type of family. The mahrams, the people that the Sharia forbids you from ever marrying. The people you would never be allowed to marry, no matter what the circumstance was. All right, even if they were unmarried and they were free, and even if they liked you, you would never be allowed to marry them because they're mahrams. It's forbidden for you to marry them. That's what the word mahram means. Mahram comes from the word haram. All right, you cannot marry these people. These people are either closely related to you by blood, or they're closely related to you by milk, or they're closely related to you by marriage. And I already listed out the 7 people who are forbidden by blood, the 7 people who are forbidden by milk, and the 4 people who are forbidden by marriage. These people, if you touch them skin to skin, it doesn't break the wudu of either one of you. And the reason why is because these people, you do not suppose that there would be some type of desire or pleasure in the touch. Like between you and your close relatives, you don't expect there to be any kind of desire there. Okay, but outside of these close relatives, there is a supposition, like you suppose that desire is there, because it's likely that some degree of desire is there when you touch someone who's not those people that are forbidden to you. Which is why touching your wife still breaks your wudu, because there is a supposition that desire is there. It's about desire. Someone asks about getting breast milk from a woman if there's a milk shortage. I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. Someone asked me to explain how the one whose private part is being touched is not nullified. It's because the one who, let's break it down into cases. Let's say a man touches his own private part with the inside part of the hand. In this case, because he did the touching, he loses his wudu. Okay? The one who got touched doesn't lose their wudu, but in this case, because he touched himself, he loses his wudu because he was the toucher. Let's say a woman touched her own private part. Same thing. She would lose her wudu because she's the toucher. Let's say now, another scenario. Let's say that a man touched another man's private part. Nothing gay, but, let's say it was a doctor doing a examination of a patient. Okay. If the doctor a man touches another man's private part with the inside part of the hand, the one who did the touching, which in this case is a doctor, he loses his wudu. The one who got touched does not lose his wudu for the simple fact that he's not the one that did the touching. Okay, the hadith says, man afda biyadihi. Okay, like the one who touched a private part with his hand, that person loses his wudu. Like the Prophet ﷺ specifically said, the one who did the touching. Like the hadith makes it clear that the one who got touched doesn't lose their wudu. And so similarly, if a female gynecologist touched a woman's private part with the inside part of her hand, the one who did the touching is the one that would lose her wudu. The one who got touched would not lose her wudu. Okay? However, if you imagine a case where the two people involved were of opposite sexes, imagine a woman touched a man's private part with the inside part of her hand, or imagine that a man touched a woman's private part with the inside part of his hand. In this case, they would both lose their wudu. Okay? But they would lose their wudu because of cause number 3, because a man and a woman touch skin to skin, which causes both of them to lose their wudu. Remember, the skin to skin touch is not limited by the inside part of the hand. Any skin anywhere of one person's body touches the skin somewhere on the other person's body. Even if it was this one's knee touching that one's back, if it was skin to skin, they both lose their wudu, whether it was a private part or not. For number 3, what matters is that they're both over a certain age, meaning they're both past a certain point of physical development, and they're opposite sex, and they're not mahrams, and the touch was skin to skin. That breaks the wudu for both of them. Doesn't matter if it was the private part or not the private part that got touched. Cause number 4 is a different cause. And I want to remind you, you need to make sure you keep them separate. Don't mix up number 3 and number 4. They are completely different. Okay, number 4 says you break your wudu if you touch a private part or the anus of a human with the inside part of the hand without a barrier. Okay, number 4, the sexes of the people involved don't matter, whereas it did matter for number 3. For number 4, the ages of the people involved don't matter, whereas the ages did matter for number 3. For number 4, it could even just be one person involved, like a person touching their own private part breaks wudu, whereas in number 3, it can't happen with just one person. And the part of the body that the touching is done with is different, because for number 4, it would only break wudu if it's with the inside part of the hand. For number 3, it breaks wudu as long as your skin did the touching, no matter where that skin was on the body. Which brings me to another difference between them, which is that number 4 only applies to 2 body parts, the front private part or the anus, whereas number 3 applies to the majority of the body, like any part of the body that's skin, which is most of it. Number 3 and number 4 are 2 very different cases. So you want to make sure you keep them separate and not conflate them, insha'Allah ta'ala. Someone asked, if you touch a woman and she has long sleeves on, does that break your wudu? Well, if the touch was not skin to skin, then it did not break wudu according to the Shafi'i madhab. If a woman's wearing long sleeves and your skin touched her sleeve, then according to the Shafi'is, your wudu is not broken. And there's no special details there. Okay, the fact that it wasn't skin to skin means you didn't lose your wudu. Remember, these 4 things that are written there on that page, those are the only 4 things that break wudu. That's it. Okay, so if you're asking about a case that's not in that list of 4, then it doesn't break wudu. Touching a woman's clothing, it's not in the list of 4, so it doesn't break wudu. Okay? Like bleeding, if you get a cut on your arm and you start bleeding, this does not break wudu, according to the Shafi'is. Eating meat, eating camel meat, these things do not break wudu. Okay? The entire exhaustive list of everything that breaks wudu are those 4 things on that page. Okay? All right, we don't want to start mixing up different madhabs here. All right, the Shafi'i school, the teaching of the Shafi'i school is that these 4 things are the only 4 things that break wudu. Yes, other madhabs have different teachings on certain things, but this madhab says these 4 things are the whole list. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Looks like there are no more questions. In that case, I will close out. Let's say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Someone asked, would a woman have to take a ghusl or make wudu after a gynecological exam, a pap smear? Well, you got to forgive me, sister. I'm not sure exactly what takes place in a pap smear. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that a doctor who's wearing gloves on her hands simply inserts a tool into the woman and then, I don't know, rubs it around or something, and then pulls the tool out. This would break her wudu, yes. And that's because something that was inside came out of one of her exits. The tool, which went inside her body, when it comes out through one of the exits, it breaks the wudu because of cause number 1. But this would not require a ghusl because intercourse did not take place. Okay, intercourse did not take place. No, we haven't gotten to the ghusl section yet, but none of the things that require a ghusl took place in that scenario. What are the 4 things that break wudu? This entire lesson was about those 4 things. If you have this book, you open to page 10 and you read the 4 things. Okay, the 4 things that break wudu, I'll say it again. Anything that anything that comes out of one of the 2 exits, except for semen. Number 2, loss of consciousness, except for sleeping if you're in a position where your butt is firmly planted. Number 3, touching of a man and a woman skin to skin without a barrier, with all the conditions we talked about, that the man and woman are both past a certain stage of development, and that they're not mahrams to one another. Number 4 is touching the private part or anus of a human being with the inside part of the hand without a barrier. These are the 4 things that break wudu, and it's the entire list of everything that breaks wudu. Anything else before I sign off? It's okay if you came late, brother. I figured that must be it because, people come late sometimes. But if you came late, I encourage you to watch the video from the beginning, insha'Allah ta'ala, so you hear what you missed. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, then may Allah have mercy on all of you and bless you. May Allah make your affairs easy until we meet again next week, insha'Allah ta'ala, at the normal time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.